Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about why men fear having sex. Oh, that is a thinker. Why do men fear having sex, and why do they bury it inside? Or is there ways that they reveal it without really saying it? These are the real questions that we are thinking about. And luckily, I have Dr. Avrum here who's going to help us think about this in a whole new way. So thank you so much, Avrum, for coming back on my show
You're
and then
welcome.
really diving deeper into the concept of men's fear. You know what I mean? So when you hear this concept of men's fear of sex, what does that make you think about?
Well, I think, first of all, I wish I could see the faces of the people listening now because I'm imagining that the women are looking really puzzled and the men are looking kind of angry.
Right?
That. So I think the notion that men are scared of sex is counterintuitive and probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people. I would say that the way I would say it that might make more sense to people is that men are afraid of women and sex with women is part of how they try to soothe their fear of women.
Mm.
So for many men, there's an old saying, and but there's a lot of time there's a lot of truth in old sayings. And this old saying in particular is women need to feel loved to have sex, and men need to have sex to feel loved. So why would that be true? Well, I think that's mostly, first of all, I think it is largely true, obviously with exceptions.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
for many women, have a sort of broader spectrum of ways in which they feel loved. They feel loved with their friends. They feel loved with their family. They feel loved maybe even at work, and they feel loved sexually, physically. They feel loved with their children. Men tend to have less, we socialize men less in emotional fluency, so they don't tend to have as wide a bandwidth. For example, the vast majority of men have no friends that they actually talk to about anything. So that's a big difference. So for men, their needs for validation and love and reassurance often get in the one basket of sex. So that
Mm.
sex for men often becomes as much about validation and reassurance, oftentimes more about validation and reassurance than it is about connection and intimacy.
That's really interesting because we don't really consider that, you know what I mean? Especially women. We don't even acknowledge the fact that men put everything in one basket. And I think that analogy of just putting all of that in one basket is really beautiful because it makes us really visualize what men are holding on to. Because they always talk about I'm holding on to a lot, I'm dealing with a lot, there's a lot of pressure on me. But now that you put it in a form of a basket, I'm just like, well, just put the basket down and just start taking stuff
Hmm.
out. You know what I mean? Like that's how I see it. But is that a thing? Can men actually start taking stuff out of that basket and really seeing it for what it is?
Well, it's like if you have a retirement account, it's like diversifying your investments, right? So it's not about you don't necessarily need to own less stocks, but maybe you need to own some bonds too. I don't know anything
Okay.
about this, so I'm probably using the wrong terms, but
It's
you get
okay.
the idea, diversifying. And the problem for men, there's a whole interesting body of literature that is generally under the heading of fragile masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And what they mean by that is that most women do not question themselves as women, meaning they've felt like a woman since they were, old enough to feel that way. They don't question whether or not they're women. They don't think that their femininity is questioned to judgment or criticism. They just are. It's just part of like, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
Men have a very different experience. Men experience masculinity as something that has to be earned, is
Mm.
not innate, and has to be, once earned, has to be defended. Because in our culture, we tend to define masculinity not proactively, but reactively. We tend to define masculinity as not feminine. So you're
Mm.
masculine as long as you don't do anything that makes anybody think you might be feminine, like
Mm.
show weakness, cry, be vulnerable, be joyful for that matter. So the problem
Yeah.
for men is that all of the good stuff in life we attribute to feminine. The
Yeah.
best things in life, intimacy, closeness, friendship, warmth, tenderness, all those things that they had in their lives with their mother, with their friends, with. But when they got socialized to be men, they had to choose between being a man or having all those things. So it's this horrible choice. And I think it's a wound that most men carry with them for most of their lives is that sort of Sophie's choice that they have to make at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I love the way that you say it because the way that you break it down makes it make you could see it. You know what I mean? I can see it at least, you know what I mean? Because as a woman, like I never really questioned my womanhood. You know what I mean? I
Right.
never really did. But I have met women that feel like because of their circumstances, they had to step up and step into that masculine role.
Hmm.
And where their femininity, if that's how you say it,
Yeah.
is not as strong as their masculine tendencies. So it is kind of tricky. But so then it makes me just wonder when men step into those emotions and they embody it and they accept it and they have friends and they have those communications and they feel all these feelings that I guess shouldn't be felt. I mean, is that their way of stepping into a feminine role, or is that just embracing themselves as a human being?
Yes, thank you. That latter is yes. I like
Okay.
that you kept going because I object to calling something masculine or feminine as if it were the exclusive property of
Yeah.
one gender or the other. So I don't think women were, meant to take care of children and men not. So the only letter to the editor I've ever written in my life, when I was a father with young kids, my
Hmm.
local newspaper ran a story with the headline, Mr. Mom. And I wrote to the paper and said, that's offensive. As a father, I find that offensive. I'm not a substitute mother. I'm a father.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a woman's job. I'm doing a man's job, which is being a father. And that's
Yeah.
not a woman's job. That's not woman's work. And so I don't think, I think we're finally figuring out that not only are men, of course, completely competent as parents, but how empty and lacking and devoid men's lives have been not developing their
Yeah.
relationships with their children. Um, One of the things I treasure most, so I work with a lot of men in my therapy practice, and one of the things I treasure most is I look at, if I'm doing a group and I look at the people in front of me and I remember each one of them how much their relationships with their children have grown in the time they've worked with me, how much closer they are with their children now. And I think that's one of the real things that men can get from therapy is not only closeness with their partner, but more close with their children.
Yeah, I think that's very validating because it just makes us realize that one, we're all human beings. Two, we're gonna have this in our DNA to react, to feel, to cry, to love,
Mhm.
to hate, to protect, to, you know what I mean, to defend. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female, it's just in our DNA to just stepping up and doing what you are supposed to do as a human being and as an individual. And I love that that's what you wrote to the editor about like, hey, I'm still a father. I mean, why take away my name, my
Come
role
Right,
when I still do things that anybody else could do? You know what I mean? And I
right.
think that was a big movement. I remember a few years back when they were talking about how fathers are stepping down in the work field and they're letting the wife after having kids to go back to work and they're doing the mom and they're stay-at-home dads. And I was just like, but why is that a big deal? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like why does society
Why is that a
make it
news
a
story?
yeah, exactly. Why is it in the news? Why is it on Good Day to America? You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be this big deal when it just should show how toxic these stigmas are, you know what I mean? And I think how exactly, I guess to come back on topic, how exactly are other ways do men reflect fear when it comes to sex?
Well, the primary way is by being more obsessively focused on their partner's pleasure than they are on their own. So this
Okay.
is why men, so first of all, to take a half step back, one of the misunderstandings women have about men's sexuality is thinking that men are desperate for sex all the time.
Yeah.
They have a higher libido than women.
Yeah.
Here's why I don't think that's true.
Okay.
If you talk to anyone who's dating in midlife, any man, one of the
Okay.
pleasant surprises of dating in midlife is that women are far more openly sexual in midlife than they are in early life.
Yes.
Women are less hung up, more open about being wanting sex, enjoying sex, wanting to have
Hmm.
it frequently. Now, those middle-aged women are not biologically really any different than the younger women. So that leads me to believe that women are as sexual as men, but are socialized to think that's nasty and slutty and bad. So they're more restrained in their expression of it. So I don't think men, first of all, are more sexual than women. I think that's nonsense. I think what you're seeing is because men need sex to feel loved, you're seeing, and they don't have a wide repertoire, they don't have close friends, they're not close to the, that sex becomes that important because it's the only way I feel loved and validated and like a good person in my life. So the urgency that men express about sex, I don't think is just physical because they would just masturbate if it were just physical.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
must be more than that. It must be emotional as well. And I think so. I think that's how their fears show up is that if we don't have sex tonight, I'm unlovable.
Yeah, I think that's a validating point. And I think that's the reason why a lot of the times the marriages end up falling out of course is because the man is not having that random or regular sex in their marriage. And then eventually they're like, well, I guess you don't love me. You know what I mean? And, that's a plausible reasoning because if men associate love by sex, then they're going to
Right.
associate, well, you don't love me because then we're not having sex. And I also love the fact that you talked about how women in their midlife they crave more sex or they openly
More open
talk
about it.
about it. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
more open to talk about it. And I have actually spoken one of my friends from Atlanta. He's older than me by like 15, 20 years. And when he was in the dating game, he would tell me like these stories of these women just openly telling them like let's have sex, let tell me your favorite position, like just on their first date, just like how do you like it? Like and he just felt like overwhelmed and like
Hmm.
pressured and was like, why are these women so vulgar? You know what I mean? And I was just like, there's nothing wrong with
They're
the
just like
women.
you.
They're just like men. They have a sex drive and they know what they want and they're not afraid to express themselves. So
Right.
I don't think you have the right to just call them out, but I think at the same time, it's like it gives you an opportunity to see this differently. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think that's the thing, that stigma of like, oh, women have to be discreet and we have to be prude and we have to be so innocent, like a little flower, untouchable. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous, but it's like it's a thing.
Right. So the other way that men's fears show up in their sexual relationships is a preoccupation with a woman's orgasm.
Mm.
So this the very well-known sex therapist Esther Perel has written about this, and she wrote essentially, to many women, they experience their male lovers not as men expressing a desire for them, but more as children asking for permission or validation.
Oh.
And so sex becomes less frequent because it starts to feel more like a parent-child relationship. And most people are not interested in having sex with their parent or child, I'm happy to say. Um, and
Yeah.
so it starts to feel like mommy, may I,
Hmm.
rather than an expression. So it feels like asking permission for something, but not like adult to adult is not like I want you, I desire you, I want to be connected to you, I want to be close to you. And so men watch women during sex and after looking for validation. Is that good? Was it good for you? Was it good? Did you come?
Yeah.
Did you come?
Yeah.
And women are, of course, understandably irritated by
Yeah. Yeah.
and they fake orgasms to get
Yes.
men off their backs, to get them to stop obsessively focusing on it. And then you have a complete mess because you have sex with neither person enjoying themselves. It's kind of like, what's the sense in that?
Exactly. And then
Um,
it feels like a waste because it's like I didn't enjoy it and I don't want to do it again because it's gonna
exactly.
feel like
Exactly.
I have to constantly boost your ego or anything like that. So it is very struggling. So how do men actually tap into this confidence and not have that fear anymore?
Well, let me say one thing about what you just said and then get to that question. And that is that I recently spoke with a new couple
Hmm.
that has been married almost 30 years and has not had sex for the last 20.
Uy.
And they're very close. They describe themselves as their best friends, partners, and it's very clear to them now. What happened is they found my book online. And then
Hmm.
they reached out to me because they were like, oh my God, we did not understand what's been going all this time, but he is terrified about being judged and criticized for his lack of sexual drive. And so he
Mm.
just avoids the whole thing. They haven't been able to talk with each other and work it out. And that's a very clear manifestation of his fears, performance anxiety, sometimes we call it, are really having a huge impact on their otherwise very satisfying relationship for both of them.
Mm.
So, to your question about how do men address these fears, what I've learned, which was new to me, a surprise to me, and it was a nice thing to learn, is that for men, it starts with talking with other men.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just too intimidating to talk with your partner. I mean, the way I came to understand that men are afraid of women is that I kept working with these men who would tell me all these things about their partners. And I would say, well, have you talked to her about that? And they would look at me like I just asked the stupidest question in the history of the world. Like, no, I can't talk to her about this. And gradually I understood that the reason they're not talking to their partners is they're afraid to talk to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, what
Exactly.
works best for men is starting off by talking with other men. And so, there's a chapter in the book which I'm particularly happy with, which is sort of a step by step guide to men. And basically, what I say is, put up a notice at Starbucks or your church or your whatever saying, I'm forming a book group. Here's the first book we're going to read. It's a men's book group.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then get a group of guys because anybody who's interested in reading that book is going to be interested in talking to other men. So
Yeah.
start as a book group. And then probably it'll become a monthly like men's get together where you have a potluck and talk to each
Yeah.
other about what the difficulties you're having as men. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping people will take me up on that. And there's a Facebook page for people to go who are doing that and things like that.
Yeah, well, you bring hope into people's lives by
Yeah.
just by something so simple as connection, you know what I mean? And if we in this day and age where technology connection is so vast and it's everywhere, people still don't utilize it in a way that they can actually get something from it. So
Yeah.
to have those groups on social media or just on a website or just, Zoom calls, you know what I mean, if you're out of the state or whatever it may be, I think having that connection will really bring it back. And then you have that community, you have that safe area, and you have those people that you feel safe enough to give you that reality check to realize, like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe we need to look at it differently. And I think that's very powerful. And it's sad that time is catching up to us because I can always pick on your brain because I love your perspective. But
Well, I
what
enjoy
can
talking to you too.
so what can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
I liked what you said about hope. I am, if you're a sports fan, I mean, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, so I always think my team's going to win this year. They don't, but I always think they're going to win this year. So I'm a therapist in part because I believe in people. I don't look at people and say, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" When I sit with a couple, I'm always looking for what is the connection between you. And it may be buried under years or decades of crap, but I'm digging around looking, see if I find, oh, there it is, just the way you looked at her or the way she put her hand on your hand. And then
Mhm.
I want to build on that. And so I guess my parting thought would be for the listeners, if you're feeling distress in your relationship, it doesn't have to be a lover, it could be a friend, whatever, any close relationship. Look for what it is that connects you with each other. Even if it's really buried, search your memory, try to remember and connect with what it is that originally drew you to this person and see if you can't reconnect with that as a starting place.
Yeah, that's a great way to start because I think that reconnection really helps people realize that they don't have to do it on their own. You know what I mean? We're moving more
Can't.
towards a society that's making you feel very individualistic and you don't need anybody and you can do it all by yourself, you know, but in reality that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's far from the truth, you know
We're
what I
we're
mean?
moving towards all those values while the suicide rate goes up, the rate of
Hmm.
drug addiction goes up, and those are directly connected to people thinking they can do it on their own. It's very clear we are tribal. We are innately
Exactly.
hardwired to be tribal.
Exactly. We are meant to do things together, work together, speak together,
Yep.
handle life together. And I think when we go through something very traumatic like a natural disaster or you know what I mean, some things like that, it really brings us back to unity, you know what I mean? But I don't think we need to experience so many natural disasters or big chaoses for us to finally find unity. You know what I mean? So I think just having that reconnection is so valuable. And it makes people really realize, like, where have I lost that connection? Where did it stop? You know what I mean? Why did I allow it to stop? And who's to blame? Is it me? Is the other person? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to ask these really hard questions with yourself and get yourself a notebook, write down all of your questions, and allow yourself the time to actually fill them out. You know what I mean? Sit
Hmm.
with them and then you'll find out more about yourself than you ever realized. So, that being said, if you enjoy this conversation as much as I do, go check out Avram, go check out his book, go check out his website. I have access to the link in the description, along with the last episode about men having fear of women. Go check that out. He goes more in depth of why men have these fears and oh, they're so powerful. That's the reason why I brought him back for this episode
And
because
I'm
we were
glad
able
you
to
did.
dive in deeper, and who knows what we may go into next, right?
Let me just
Who
add one
knows?
thing to that, which
Yes.
is I pride myself on I return all emails within 24 hours. So if you have questions about the book or about what you and I are talking about today, if you email, you find my email on the website. You can reach me through the website. You can also sign up for the mailing list and get a free ebook about relationships.
See, more reasons for you to check him out, hit him up, so that you don't have to feel alone and so
Yeah.
that you can start connecting with real people who want to help you in your real life, you know? So,
Yep.
with that being said, always, always, always keep thinking, you guys. Bye.